Hello, hello, hello. Welcome once again to everyone to your Wednesday night webinar brought to you by NOCD. NOCD, an online platform for the treatment of OCD and related conditions. If you're looking for help for OCD or related things like body-focused repetitive behaviors or tics or hoarding, and the ancillary things that come along like anxiety disorders or mood issues, check us out at NOCD.com. That's NOCD.com. And we also do one of my favorite things, the NOCD 411 sessions. These sessions are for people who might not be ready for primetime therapy, or you got a friend or family member that has OCD or seems to, and you want to ask questions of an expert to talk about it. Well, we would be more than happy to chat with you to tell you about what OCD is and how you might be able to support that person to finally get into doing some treatment. So we do work in the UK, Australia, and Canada, and the US, and we take more and more insurances all the time. So we would be more than happy to work with you. If you're looking for that kind of help, check us out, nocd.com. All right, let's get into it and let's see what's going on. Kel says, I need some help because I'm feeling like I'm becoming OCD about my OCD. I feel like some of my exposures are becoming compulsions and vice versa. I'm not quite sure what to do because it feels like a lose-lose, because if I do an exposure for one symptom, then I'm doing a compulsion for another. One of the things, Kels, that I enjoy doing in a situation like this where people are kind of stuck about should I or should I not do something is a coin flip. And I just say, all right, I'm in this situation now. In the past, I've done some ERP to this, but it might be feeling now for some other things a bit compulsive. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to flip a coin. If it's tails, I'll do the ERP. If it's heads, I won't. That way, I can learn to live with both sides of the coin. Get that? See, both sides of the coin. I thought that was pretty good. Anyway, and that might be able to help you get through the situation where you don't have to sit there and think about what you should or shouldn't do and how you should or shouldn't do it. And if you have the right motivation to be doing it or something like that, you just go ahead and you let the coin flip decide for you. And then you go about your day with that and see where that goes. So I'd give that a try. See where it's just kind of my first thought of it. As always, the stuff we talk about tonight, suggestions, ideas. This is not therapy. If you are looking for therapy, though, you know where to go, nocd.com. James says, good evening. I feel like I have to confess all my wrongdoings to a friend of mine that goes to my church. If not, my anxiety goes up. What's good ERP? Not confessing all of the things to your friend that goes to church with you, letting your anxiety go up, learning that you can handle it, living in the discomfort, saying things like maybe or maybe not, those things will come true. I don't know. I can learn to live with that. It is a potential possibility that, yes, maybe I will or won't be able to deal with it. Those kinds of things. Living in doubt, living in uncertainty. Let's all remember here, what does OCD want? OCD wants certainty. OCD wants an absolute answer. OCD wants to know exactly how things are going to go. OCD wants other people brought into this to give us opinions because we don't trust our opinion. So we go online or we ask friends or family or something like that. And the issues with that are, of course, what? Well, we learn not to trust ourselves. We only learn to trust other people. And after a while, who do we actually trust? Only people who tell us negative things. We pay no attention to people who give us any kind of positives whatsoever. We only pay attention to people who give us negatives. 99 out of 100 people could say, don't worry about that. One says, well, it might be kind of bad. You will only pay attention to the one that said, well, it might be kind of bad. You will ignore the others, right? That's just the way that it goes. So allow yourself to be uncomfortable. Learn that you can handle that experience. Right? Is your friend got a direct line to your higher power to then be able to absolve you of all of these things? Or does your OCD tell you, you have to tell someone this and then see what their reaction is? And then if it's not so bad or they say, don't worry about it, whew, you're off the hook. But if they look at you go, ooh, man, then you better do some absolution of that, because if you don't, there's a darn good chance you might be spending eternity in a place you don't really want to. Does that sound about right? Because I'm thinking it probably does. That's kind of where these things go. Carolina says, how to handle the fear of OCD itself, as in all the ways it can ruin life, and basically that you can come back even after, or it can come back after recovery. This is really hindering your treatment process. Well, Carolina, let me take it out of OCD for a moment. Let's say that you were treated for cancer. And let's say that They did a surgery and they did chemo and they did radiation. And then they did a scan and they said, no more cancer. We cannot detect any cancerous cells in your body. There's nothing coming up in your blood draws, anything of that nature. And then they say, but the cancer could come back. Carolina, should you sit next to your tombstone for the rest of your life wondering when the cancer will come back? Or ought you go hopefully live your life enjoying it to the fullest potential, so that way if it ever does come back and finally takes you, at least you were able to say, you know what, I made the best of it. I did everything that I possibly could to try to get the best out of that experience. Carolina, I'm going to ask you to stop sitting next to your tombstone wondering when you're going to be under it, and I would like you to go and live your life. Not only could OCD come back, the building you're in could collapse. You could get struck by lightning. You may get run over by a car tomorrow. I mean, let's just think about it. We could probably list a gazillion ways that you can be dead within the next 24 hours, right? Why is it none of those are ruining your life? Why do you seem to not care whatsoever about any of those? But the fact that OCD could come back, maybe even in 20 years, is stopping you from living your life. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, right? Now, of course, that's the way that is, because guess what? OCD makes no sense, right? It is an emotional issue, not a logical issue. This is why we don't do talk therapy for OCD, because we can't talk people out of OCD. We can behave people out of OCD, but we're not going to talk people out of OCD. If we could, I would have one session with people. I would look at you in the eyes and I would say, stop it. Stop worrying about it. Stop thinking about it. Get it out of your head. You'll be fine. Everything will be okay. Would that work? No. So, Carolina, I want you to think about, what is it you're really looking for? An absolute? Well, no one can give you that. OCD says it's possible, but that's a lie that OCD tells you. So, here's what I'm going to do, Carolina. To prove my point, I'm going to wish to be struck by lightning within the next 24 hours. And I'm still going to go do all of the things that I need to do in the next 24 hours, even though my hope is I will be struck by lightning within the next 24 hours. So let's see if I show up next week on this webinar, because if I've been struck by lightning, I have a feeling I won't be here. If I do get struck by lightning, I'll probably be dead or in the hospital, right? But I don't think I'm going to be here. So, Carolina, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wish for that. And I'm going to allow that to be there. I'm going to see what happens. If I can do that, my hope is you can learn. You too can live with the fact that, OCD could come back after treatment. It probably will raise its head once in a while and throw things at you. But if you're looking at like a cure for OCD, and that is the idea that you will never have some kind of intrusive or unwanted thought or image or urge, well, I don't know anybody who has that. I know absolutely no one who doesn't experience anything that they don't want. Everybody does. It's part of being human. OCD just says you need to be a superhuman. You need to be better than being human, right? And I say, no, you don't. Susie says, I'm struggling with POCD and your 1-year-old son. You struggle with avoidance and fear of the thoughts coming up. It is easier to distract yourself or fill up all your time. You also struggle with rumination. Well, Susie, yes, it would be easier, of course, to distract yourself. And I'm sure your ruminations come up with all of the worst, awful, horrible things. And then you think about yourself as being a terrible, awful, horrible mom, because what mother would ever think any of these terrible, awful, horrible things about their own child? And maybe I should report myself, or maybe I shouldn't have had my child in the first place, or maybe I should have someone else come and live with us and raise the child so that I make sure that I protect them and nothing bad ever happens to them or anything like that whatsoever. Welcome to the hell of pedophilic OCD. I mean, it's just the way that it is. Now, we know that OCD attacks the things that you love the most, and I'm going to make an assumption you actually like your child. I can't make any proof or guarantee of that, but I'll make the assumption of that. Now, here's where your problem is. You're struggling, as you say, I'm going to read what you said. You struggle with avoidance and fear of the thoughts. Well, then that's your problem. They're going to keep coming the more that you struggle with avoiding them. Because I'm going to interpret and struggle with avoiding them, meaning you're sure hoping they're not going to be there. you're hoping not to think them. So if I was only at my house tonight, I pick up my pink elephant right now and I put it in front of the camera and I would say, don't think of a pink elephant right now. Have no pink elephant thoughts whatsoever. But the moment I tell you that, I'm going to bet that you're probably going to think of the pink elephant, even though I'm telling you not to think of the pink elephant. So here's the deal, Susie. You're pink elephanting yourself. You're sitting there hoping you don't think this. And by gosh, the only thing you're going to think is all of the things that you don't want to think. So are you going to allow yourself to be able to think things? Or are you going to tell yourself some things are just off the table, instantly making them the things that your brain is going to go to? I leave it up to you to make some decisions on that. And if you're looking for help for something like that, check out NOCD. We've got some people who really know what they're doing to help you deal with those types of things. Jack says, your OCD is all mental. You're aware of your obsessions and your compulsions. However, when the illogical thoughts occur, I don't even like that word. I don't know what a logical or illogical thought is. I'll just say thoughts or images or urges because I'm not going to debate the logic or illogic of anything. Even though you're aware that they're illogical, you still find yourself trying to prove them wrong. Well, we see a compulsion there, okay? When you recognize that trying to prove them wrong is a compulsion and you stop, you're left with this debilitating fear, anxiety, low self-esteem, meaning that the thought is impacting your self-worth. And it makes you feel like crap and confused. I thought not doing the compulsions would have the opposite effect. How can I stop the thoughts from impacting my self-worth? Jack, it seems to me that you're having this notion that you shouldn't even be having these thoughts, right? These things shouldn't be popping into your head. So let's all think of like a horror film or the scariest movie you've ever seen or heard of, right? Or think of maybe, even a nightmare you might have had. Look at all of the things that the brain is possible, can possibly conceive, right? It comes up with movies that titles I won't even mention because they're so way out there. And, should we think of the people who wrote some of these horror films as depraved, awful, horrible individuals? Because they don't really care if you do. They're laughing all the way to the bank. They're making money left and right. So for them, it's a really awesome kind of thing. That's how they are. So Jack, I'm just wondering what makes you different. Why are these, as you say, illogical things so awful and terrible? I mean, I'm going to go, Jack. You may not know this if this is the first time here, but I do have a card in my wallet. There it is. I will pull it out, proving a point to all of you. It says right there, line 3. I used to say hope, I hope, but now it just says hope my parents died tonight because it is very worn off. But it says, I hope my parents died tonight, please God. And there's a 666 on it. Jack, I'm just curious. How terrible am I, Jack, for having not only thought that, and I asked someone else to do it, someone I was working with almost 20 years ago, because that was part of their ERP exercise. And I told them that I would carry that card around in my wallet with me. And if they ever came up and saw me and said, hey, do you still have that card in your wallet? I'd be able to say, of course, I still have the card in my wallet. Jack, how terrible of a person am I for having written down, I hope my parents die tonight. If anybody wants to leave some judgment on that, that would be fine. You may think that I'm an awful and horrible person. It is possible that you think that of me, and if you do, that's fine. I'm absolutely okay with that. My parents know that's in my wallet. They might be watching tonight. Sometimes they do. So hi, Mom and Dad. Still hoping you die. And Yeah, we'll see if it works, right? One day that card's going to work. Well, twice the card will work, actually. It could be a 2-for-1, maybe a terrible car accident takes them both out or something like that. But it could be a 1 and then a 1. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But Jack, I'm just wondering, why don't I feel like crap, as you say, and confused? I'm doing no compulsions at all to try to neutralize that. And I'm just allowing those things to be there. So when you say, how can you stop the thoughts from impacting your self-worth? There's a part of you, I think, that's telling you that you shouldn't be having these thoughts or these images or these urges. And that's what's really part of the problem. And I want anyone listening here tonight to be open to your brain's going to just go weird places, right? It's going to happen. And therefore, are there certain things that are off limits and that we should punish? Because then we would have thought police. And if we have thought police, well, then should we all vote as to what things we should or shouldn't think? Here's the problem, though. The moment we create a list of all the things that we shouldn't think, everyone's going to start thinking them because they're going to be hoping not to think of them. And then pretty much everyone will be in jail and no one will be running society anymore because we'll all be in jail because we all told ourselves not to think of something, which then led us all to think of it. And now there's nobody left to do anything. So we'd be kind of screwed there in that situation, I believe. So, Jack, how can you stop the thoughts from impacting your self-worth? The moment you decide that these thoughts are just thoughts or images or urges and they don't have to mean anything whatsoever, I think you'll get there. Valentina says, OCD convinced me that when I try to act like everybody else, not being scared of carcinogens, I somehow betray your true self to get people to like me. Therefore, when I clean things, I act out of my true desire to defend yourself against careless people. How do I stop viewing myself as a victim and start ERP? Well, I think the best thing if you want to start ERP is to work with a specialist who knows how to do ERP. That's the first place I would go, Valentina, is reach out and find somebody who can guide you through this experience. And, there's lots of people out there. You can check out NOCD.com. The International OCD Foundation has a list of all sorts of people. There's a lot of great therapists out there who are well-trained in doing ERP and working with OCD. And I would go there and I would see what you can do to meet with somebody who can really get you through that. Ty says, how does one properly mourn the time and opportunities they lost to OCD? You say you look back on your life before you realized you had OCD and feel pretty angry with yourself for not knowing sooner. Everyone, we're going to have a funeral right now. Okay. So if everyone would gather me in thoughtful contemplation, we're going to have a funeral for Ty's OCD right now. So, dearly beloved, I don't know if that's a wedding or a funeral, but we'll just say, dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to finally bury Ty's OCD. Ty has looked upon his or her OCD there. I'll just say there. Sorry, Ty, I don't know. I'll say there. Their OCD as something that has interfered in their life, and they would no longer like their OCD to have an influence on their life. It appears they may have had some good therapy, and once they've realized they had OCD, did things to try to get it to not be so influential in their life. But they're still holding on to anger at themselves for not knowing earlier in their life that they had OCD. Let us all bow our heads and wish OCD goodbye and wish anger and frustration goodbye, because it appears rather unnecessary to be angry at oneself for not knowing something that one isn't specialized in, such as if, for example, if I were to have an aneurysm tomorrow, how angry should I be at myself for not knowing that one of my blood vessels was bulging in my brain? And how much should I beat myself up over that fact? Now, Ty does not appear that they would be doing that for any medical reasons, but Ty does appear to be frustrated that they are not a specialist in OCD, even though they may not have gone to graduate school to study it and put in the 25 years of work on it like your favorite preacher here, Dr. McGrath has. But Ty still feels that that doesn't really matter and they should have known something, which means they are shoulding all over the place, which, as we all know, is a terribly awful, horrible idea to do. But, when you have anxiety and OCD, you do often terrible and awful, horrible things to yourself, like should all over the place and believe that you must be perfect and think that you must be in control of everything and be very, very frustrated that you don't have all of the knowledge and answers for everything, which Ty likely would never hold against anyone else in their life whatsoever, because Ty appears to be a very wonderful person who doesn't blame anyone else in the world for not having known they have OCD, but Ty feels that they are special and the rules of the world apply to Ty differently than to everybody else. And therefore Ty should have known something, even though nobody else does. Amen. I mean, Ty, was that good enough? I hope you all had a lovely funeral experience there. I think we can now cremate or bury or maybe even throw Ty's OCD in a hole and put a tree over the top of it. As long as it doesn't sprout an OCD tree, we'll be fine. No one wants an OCD tree in their backyard. They're terrible. They're very messy, terrible trees. So maybe we could just put Ty's OCD into a rocket ship. I hear now that you can do that with remains, and they can send it off into space, and then it could just go crash into the sun. Oh, but Ty, I mean, obviously, I think we're all pretty aware that if we were to put your OCD into a spaceship and we were to send it off to the sun, that it is a possibility that it would then affect the ability of the sun to shine anymore, therefore causing the sun to go defunct and kill everything on Earth, because now Ty's OCD, being the all-powerful and almighty OCD that it is, definitely can have interference with the hydrogen and helium reactions of the sun, and therefore causing it to potentially supernova, and we would all be wiped out very quickly. Although fascinatingly, from a speed of light perspective, if the sun were to supernova right now, we wouldn't know until 8 minutes from now because of the way the speed of light works. But that small price to pay. And therefore, we don't have to worry about the lunar eclipse tomorrow, which turns the moon red, which, if you are of certain beliefs, is the color of certain underworld demons and so on. So now we don't have to worry about the red supermoon tomorrow, and therefore I'll be potentially punished for that as well. Thank you for attending the service. A tithe of 10% of all your income is appreciated, by the way. And we will now move on to our next question. A21 says, when I see a loved one struggling, I try to bring it to their attention to stop and remind them not to fall for it, or I try to talk to them to get their mind off it, but they're not engaging and just want to be left alone. What can I do about that? So, A21, one of the things that I think that you can do is you can always recommend for somebody to go and meet with someone who's a specialist. And if that person is complaining about how their life stinks or they wish they weren't thinking these things, maybe they would like you to continue to try to talk to them to help them get their mind off it, because maybe that's then using you as a form of distraction away from some of the things that are going on. So A21, what I would say is I would like you to basically just say to the person, help is available, and I would like to connect you to it if possible. When you're ready, you just let me know. And that's all that you do. That's all that you say. You don't get into these debates or discussions about it, because, boy, if it is OCD really would love to have a debate and discussion about it. That's just the way that it goes, is to have big old debates and discussions about things. Catherine says, used to watch these a bunch. Right, great. Hit some remission. Awesome. You've started grad school. Okay, awesome. You're working with a therapist and you're struggling with some depression. You're struggling to conceptualize where depression maybe came from. Naturally, your OCD is having a field day with this. Well, Catherine, here's something to really think about as you say that you're stuck, because this is a newer kind of experience for you, and not necessarily as simple as go park in front of a church or stare at a knife or something like that. Yeah. And, you used to be Captain Cass. Hi, Catherine. Okay, I remember. So, Catherine, here's the thing that I want you to think about. if we think of, did my voice just crack there? Wow, I feel like I'm a teenager. Catherine. Yeah, there we go. Anyway, so Catherine, here's the thing that I want you to think about. If we think about major depressive disorder and we go to our Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, fifth version, text revision, TR, what we will see is that there are two things you need for depression, at least one of the first two definitions. The first definition is I feel depressed. The second is I've lost interest or pleasure in things I've once enjoyed. Now, if we think about OCD for a while, if OCD attacks things that we love or that we enjoy, well, then we can kind of understand why we might start to feel some depression, right? Because now maybe we've lost interest or pleasure in things that we used to enjoy because we're very afraid of those things because of the way OCD interacts with those things. So maybe what you're experiencing now is, you've lost interest or pleasure in some things that you used to enjoy because of the effect of OCD on them. That's leading you to not get the reinforcement from those things. And because of that, that might be some depression that's going on. And if that's the case, we can use a exposure and response prevention like experience called behavioral activation, which is where we have you start going out and doing those things that you're not doing because you're depressed and getting the reinforcement back from those things. And that's what I really would want you to work on. If I was working with you, I would be creating all these behavioral activation exercises to get you back into the world and doing stuff that you might not be doing right now out of fear. Dr. McGrath, this is truth exists. Should I dedicate a time every day to do ERP or just do it whenever intrusive thoughts arise? I don't see why you couldn't do both, right? I think that you could dedicate some time to purposely do it, but also be ready to do it as things arise. So I don't think it has to be a one or the other. I think you can absolutely do both of those. There's no problem with that. Alex, she wrote, says, I do an action. It feels like I'm acting out of part of your intrusive thought right then and there. It would be the equivalent of an exposure since you think it's something harmful. How harmful then are you, Alex? It would be my question. If you are acting out a part of your intrusive thought, I have intrusive thoughts all the time. I've said on here, and you all know that if any of you are at an OCD conference or something and you and I happen to be on a staircase together, just know that I will think about throwing you down the stairs. Now, I've had the thought. If thought-action fusion exists, then it's equal to an action. Alex, how bad am I in that situation? Or are we all going to work on just recognizing, okay, we can handle that, right? We're going to work on handling that. That's what we want. Jay Winter says, when in the middle of a relationship retroactive jealousy episode, you say some mean things that you regret. Am I verbally abusive if I went down the rabbit hole? Also, your thoughts on ketamine for OCD treatment. There's still a lot of research being done on ketamine, so I'll be interested to see what some of the publications say. And if you're verbally abusive, what I think you ought to do is give your partner a fair warning that they are allowed to put a hand up or walk away in a certain situation where you're starting to get to. You guys can come up with rules of engagement in certain things. And if your partner feels as if this has gone above and beyond, they are allowed to step away from it. And you work on respecting that so that they feel that they're safe in the relationship and that they're not being attacked. Okay. Alex, when should you tell someone you are dating that you have OCD? Wow, that is a great question. And I don't know if there's an absolutely right answer to that. I think that it comes about when you have a trust of that person. It's not that I don't think you have to be, head over heels in love with someone, but I think that you have to have a trust of that person. And you have to respect that person's decision when you tell someone that you have OCD about that. By the way, I just recorded a Get to Know OCD podcast with Mackenzie, who's been on with me now and then, and her husband, and they do discuss that in the podcast. So stay tuned for that and check it out. It was really interesting discussion that we had with them. Joe asks, is it possible that a person could have dormant, controlled OCD and actually functioning quite well in life. But they then enter talk therapy, and all of a sudden that controlled OCD flares up massively because talk therapy is all about trying to find answers and solutions, whereas controlling OCD is all about being happy without the answers or solution. I asked before talk therapy, you were functioning well in life, no compulsions or rituals, ignoring your intrusive thoughts. So here's what I would say. I don't know that you were actually controlling OCD. I think that you weren't reading into it and not really caring so much about it is really what it was. But as I always like to say, control is an illusion, right? I don't think that there is such a thing as being in control of much of anything. I don't know what I'm in total control of at all, right? If I tell myself not to blink my eyes, well, I'm going to blink eventually. If I tell myself to stop breathing, my body's going to take over. I'm going to pass out and then I'm going to start breathing again. If I'm not even total control of my own bodily functions, I'm definitely not going to be in control of the way I think or feel about certain things. Now, Joe, is it possible that going into some talk therapy has led you down the road of thinking about the compulsions and the obsessions in a different way than you'd been doing? I suppose it could, right? It wouldn't shock me to hear something of that nature. And, so maybe what you've learned is go back to your ERP work that you were doing. And that was really what you need to do, right? That turns out to be your best kind of treatment for yourself. This is, we have interesting discussions. We've put out things too about the role of talk therapy. I always just say be wary of a talk therapy for OCD, especially when it's going to involve safety behaviors. A lot of talk therapy will involve doing what we can to feel good in the moment of the session, and hopefully you leave the session feeling better than you did when you came in. For a lot of people, not everyone, all right? I'm not making a blanket statement. I'm just saying that happens a lot, though. And there's a lot of people who are taught in these talk therapy sessions things like diaphragmatic breathing, muscle relaxation, thought replacement. If you have a thought you don't like, replace it with one you do. And we know that those aren't good things for OCD because OCD can turn many of those things right into a compulsion. So that's not where we want to go in OCD treatment. When people ask me, should I do a talk therapy? My first response is usually, why don't we try the evidence-based treatment first and see where it goes? I've even offered to people, if you want to do more talk therapy afterwards and see where all of this came from, we can look into that. No one's taken me up on the offer yet because at that point, everybody's pretty thrilled with how their life's going and they don't want to dive into all of that anymore. It's just not something that they're all that interested. So I don't really see it having to be necessary. Natural Born Loser says, is it normal to feel almost disgusted by affection from your partner when you have relationship themed OCD? It could very well be, right? I mean, because in relationship OCD, you're going to doubt everything about the relationship, even if the person really loves you or not, or if you really love them. And when you have all this doubt and then somebody shows you affection, it could be very confusing because, here's this affection they're showing, but oh my gosh, I have all this doubt about it. How do I know that it's good or bad or right or wrong, or that I'm feeling what I'm supposed to be feeling? And it could be a trigger for you then. And remember, sometimes our triggers are fight, flight, or freeze, right? Most of us will flight or freeze, but some people fight. Some people might get angry or frustrated about certain things. And it might be more of that fight kind of response. So that could happen in this situation. And maybe that's what's going on there. Sid says, what would you recommend for ERP exercises or treatments for fear your partner is cheating on you? Well, Sid, that can be pretty complicated. So definitely I would first of all work with a therapist who's going to help you dealing with that, because there's a couple of things that we want to check into, right? A, do you have evidence of it or not? Have they cheated on you in the past? Have you been cheated on in the past? And therefore you're overly sensitive to these types of things. Do you have no evidence of it whatsoever, but you're what-ifing yourself? All these kinds of things. So it's a pretty complicated answer, but here's some things just to kind of consider. There are people out there who are going to specialize this and really help you with that. And for me, it would be learning to live with whatever the thoughts or the images or the urges are that I have. and move on. Because my concern would be this, is that if you have it about this partner and you think, okay, well, if I leave this partner, then I'll find someone else. I don't see why it wouldn't transfer to the next partner, the next partner, the next partner. So to me, what it really means is learning that you can handle these things without having to do compulsions with no matter what or who your partner is. Okay. All right. People saying OCD is hard and stressful. They're very tired. They're very worn out. Yep. But that's where I would go to ERP. Kafunk says, how does ERP help with generalized anxiety disorders? Well, I love to expose people to the things they worry about and see if they actually come true. Worry seems to beget more worry. And what happens in generalized anxiety disorder, you're almost distracting yourself by thinking about all of the things. Tom Borkovec, interesting research that he did on worry and generalized anxiety disorder, talked about it's a coping strategy to deal with terrible things by thinking about all of the things. And that way you can keep your mind focused on something like what if this and what would I do? And then what would I do here? And how would I handle this? And how would I handle that? Trying to come up with all of these answers. And, Tom said, in some ways it may feel preparatory as well. So if you think of it, if this is calm and this is anxious, right? And if you're worried about bad things happening, well, you jump from here to here. Right? Okay. And let me change that. Start that one over. If you're calm and something bad happens, you jump from here to here. Okay. If you're worried about the bad thing happening and then it happens, you jump from here to here. Worry is getting you ready for the worst case scenario. The problem is, how often does the worst case scenario actually occur? Well, almost never. But we tell ourselves that we should be prepared for it just in case. And because of that, we get ourselves all worked up, right? Now, imagine you're in traffic, right? And it's a lot of stop and go traffic. But you know what? At some point it could open up. Should you keep your foot on the brake and on the gas at the same time, spinning your tires the whole time, creating a ton of smoke with your tires, so that when it does open up, boom, you'll be going 60 miles an hour as quickly as possible? Or can you wait, and then when it opens up, you'll go with the flow of traffic, and eventually you'll move up to it going 60 miles an hour? You could do both, right? One of them is going to be far healthier for your car than the other. Because if you're going to hold the brakes, that's going to really wear the brakes. And if you're going to keep spinning the tires like that, it's going to wear down your tires. And you're probably going to piss all sorts of people off around you because you're going to create all this toxic tire smoke that everyone's going to have to inhale, and they're going to not like you. So do you have to be ready to go 60 miles an hour at all times? No. When it opens up, you can hit the gas and you can go. But with generalized anxiety disorder, it's almost like you have to be ready to deal with everything all at once at all times. And if you're not, you're going to hate yourself for not having been ready and not being prepared for it. Even though it almost never actually occurs, that doesn't really matter. What matters is you should be ready for all things at all times. So it's almost like letting your guard down a little bit and allowing for some vulnerability and allowing for some things to happen and just learning that you can handle that. Okay. Does certainty ever come back after doing ERP? Angela asked. Well, Angela, I don't think certainty was ever there in the first place, actually. I think there was an illusion of certainty that was there, but I don't think it ever actually was. So, Angela, after a car accident, do you ever go back to certainty that you'll never be in an accident? Or I'm going to bet this actually, prior to the accident, you actually never had certainty that you wouldn't get into an accident, but you had an illusion of certainty that you wouldn't get into an accident, right? So should we have been driving in the first place? Well, we live very often in illusions of certainty. And when those get violated, then we want proof of certainty. But there is no proof of certainty because there is no certainty. Now, I would say about anything, right? Again, I'm hoping to be hit by lightning within the next 24 hours. Well, 23 and a half hours now. It could happen. It's a possibility. And I'm going to do no compulsion to try to neutralize it, actually. In fact, I'm really hoping that lightning is going to strike me in the next 24 hours, 23 and a half. So, Angela, I'm going to live with the doubt and the uncertainty about that. And that's where I want you to go too. It isn't about getting certainty back. It's about managing the doubt, living with it. Whoa, excuse me. Sorry. Little sneezy there. Holly says, I get it. It flares sometimes. My therapist refers to it as an OCD episode when it can be dormant and then return. Yep, there you go. Artist Work Painting, LLC, says, how do you deal with sensory motor obsessions, discomfort while doing treatment? Talk to your therapist about that, right? Come up with exercises about it. One of the things I like to do is add interoceptive exposures to things. I like people to learn that they can handle all the various physical sensations that might occur in their body while they are doing treatment. So if that means running in place, hyperventilating, breathing through straws, spinning in chairs, all of those things, that's what I want you to learn that you can handle doing. That's really important. And once you learn that you can handle that, I don't think you'll be so bothered by it anymore. C3PO, SEE, nice, says, perfect timing for this stream. Excellent. Helene says, I'm 62 now and I don't want to die in this nightmare. So, Helene, you don't have to. I've treated people who are almost 90 years old to start therapy. So you've got to jump on some people that I've treated, and you can still live a great, wonderful life that isn't run by OCD if you choose to work on that and do some good therapy. All right. How can I encourage my loved one with OCD to go to his appointments and be his own advocate to get help and use all the resources available to learn to manage his OCD? Perry, one of the things that I would suggest is that's why we have our NOCD 411 sessions. I'd be happy to have one of our folks talk to you and give you some really great tips on that if you want more in depth. But I can give you a couple of quick things here. One is I would say you might decide that if they do the things they need to do to help themselves, then you will also do certain things for them too. If they choose not to do the things to help themselves, then you can remove yourself from certain things also. For example, let's say that they are working on trying to get to places on time and they're always late, right? And you might accommodate them. You might be late with them. If they're doing treatment and if they're going to the appointments and they're working on it, I would say, okay, if you're going to be late with them, you can make that choice. If they skip appointments and they're not working on it, though, I would say, don't be late, right? You can leave. If it means you take the car and they've got to get a ride there somehow, if you don't have two cars or something like that, that's what I want you to do. I don't want you then to accommodate their OCD if they're not doing things to help themselves. All right. After that sneeze, I got to blow my nose. So off camera and mute for a moment. Be right back. Whew, okay, much better. So yes, it is okay for people who are family members and friends of people with OCD that if the person with OCD in your life is not doing things to try to help themselves and they're engaging you to be the help for them, you don't have to be that. You don't have to provide those safety behaviors. You don't have to provide those accommodations, right? I often liken this to drugs and alcohol. If a person that you loved was in rehab and you went to visit them and they said to you, this is the worst I've ever felt in my life. I feel like my body's exploding, my skin's falling off, I have a fever, I have diarrhea, I'm throwing up, I want to die. This is the worst I've ever felt. Could you please go down the street to the liquor store and grab some vodka for me? Would you do it? Would you say, all right, you know what? I'll be right back. I'm going to go get you some vodka because I don't like seeing you feel this way, and I want you to feel better, and I know that vodka is the way to feel better. If you wouldn't do that, which, boy, I sure hope you would not, then you also don't have to provide any safety behaviors or accommodations to someone's OCD. Now, I'm not saying just cut it off today, right? I think it's best if you work with someone and you set some timelines on things. But there's got to come a point where if you want to see the OCD to get better, it's only going to be better if it isn't getting all sorts of accommodations provided to it. Yep, C3PO. I think other people would agree. Sometimes they'd like to lock themselves in the room and not come out either, right? Eleanor says, how to talk back to OCD. Eleanor, I don't think it's about talking back to OCD. I think it's about just hearing OCD and then moving on. There's no need to engage it. The moment you start talking back to OCD, guess what? It's going to try to grab you into a conversation. But it could just be like someone doing catcalls on the street. You need not pay any attention to them at all, and you can just keep on moving on and walking. They're not worth it. OCD is not worth it. What's the average lifespan of someone with OCD? Is this disorder dangerous to our health? I haven't seen that people with OCD die earlier than people without OCD. But in terms of lifespan can be thought of in certain ways. I think the years of life lived by a person, different than how long you'll live, but the years of life lived feel probably shorter for people with OCD if you take into account all the time spent on OCD. I saw an interesting thing recently. It was about, if you live to, I think, 80, and it was, almost a third of your life will be spent asleep. So, that's 27 years, right? And then you'll have time in school and work. That's a lot of time. And then you'll have time going to the bathroom. That's a lot of time. And then you'll have time eating. That's a lot of time. And so if you kind of think about how much of our life do we really have to live, it's really not a ton. And my hope would be that you make the best of it, right? My hope would be that you do whatever you can to try to live that life and not have that life be ruled by obsessive compulsive disorder. Mm-hmm. How do I know if I have OCD? The only thing I do is constantly running mind. The only thing I can do is keep repeating a mantra. That's not the only thing that you can do, actually. And I would work with a therapist to kind of go over that, right? And Brienne says, you gave up on OCD treatment. Looks like yesterday you realized you're not ready to face your fears. And you know what? I'm not going to make you face your fears, right? I could never, ever force anyone to do it, right? I'm not going to force anyone to do ERP. I don't think that that's the right way to go. What I would do, right, is encourage you to kind of recognize that you're probably a lot stronger than you give yourself credit for. And if you find a good therapist who does good ERP and works a hierarchy, I think that you could really get the help that you need. So that's what I would say. Holly says, you mentioned asking people something and going to that 1% for the negative comment, right? You find yourself almost unsatisfied with the responses until it's the worst case scenario and build your own opinion on it. You're wondering why we do that and how to minimize that. Well, why we do that? Because OCD is a what if condition. And the what if always goes to the worst case scenario, at least from a therapy point of view. Holly, guess what's never happened in a therapy session with me? No one has ever come into a therapy session and said, Dr. McGrath, what if everyone loves me and thinks I'm awesome? I would love to get therapy on that. I'm so afraid that everybody thinks I'm just a really great person. I'm so afraid that everybody thinks that I'm helpful and kind. No one wants therapy for that, Holly, right? Because why would that be a problem? It wouldn't be, right? So you're only going to go to therapy for things that you think would be a terrible, awful, horrible thing. And that's what's going to really run your life, right? And because of that, that's why you're going to what if all these things. Elon says, what are your thoughts on emerging evidence that EMDR may be helpful to treat BDD? Have you seen any clinical benefits or concern with its use? I haven't seen any articles on that, so I will have to check that out and let you know, Elon. I'm really not sure. Let's see. Suffering Sucks. Great name. I thought automatically of Suffering Succotash from Looney Tunes. You say you have a moral responsibility OCD. Your OCD is rational and logical. Maybe not, right? But the most likely scenarios, but nonetheless possible. Well, sure. Things are possible. In OCD, we confuse possibility and probability. And we take a look at something that might be probable as highly possible. It's really hard for you to see through it being OCD because it is logical. You heard the science suggest that ERP does not work for everyone. Well, we haven't found a therapy yet that works for everybody. No medication works for everybody. No therapy works for absolutely everybody as well. And I can't make anybody do ERP. And if someone's not ready to do ERP, I'm not going to. But I've sure seen it work very, very well for people. But that being said, there's no 100% one right now that I've seen. That being said, just because something may have a logic to it doesn't mean that it still wouldn't be OCD. Logic says that I could get hit by a car tomorrow, right? If I'm being logical, it is a possibility. And I find myself in a very large city right now, and a very, very busy one that has a lot of traffic. So my odds of getting hit by a car have gone up substantially in the last several hours. How much fear should I have? It is logical. Or could I just now be more kind of watching things, right? Can I just be like, okay, well, here's what I'm going to do then. I am going to just really watch as I cross the street. I'm going to check both ways. Not that I don't do that at home. I'll be here for a bit and then I'll be home. It's fine. But am I potentially logically, statistically in a more dangerous place? Sure. So I have some logic to it. Should I do compulsions? I'm not going to. I don't see the need for them. I don't think that they will add anything to the experience whatsoever. Okay. Holly asked, does anyone know if these videos can be accessed after the stream? Yes. If you go to the NOCD YouTube channel, you'll be able to find them. Absolutely. OCD Surviving says, I was having really, really troublesome and skewed perceptions of yourself and life to the point you have no idea the negative decisions and feelings you were having. This aspect of OCD you never understood. Here's the thing. We may not figure it all out. And one of the things that I say, and I don't know if this is a real word, but I like to think that I coined this word, OCD is unfigureoutable. So my job, OCD surviving, is not to help you figure out every feeling and every decision that you make. That's just not where I'm going to go with it. I don't think that that's going to get us anywhere. I don't think that that's going to be very helpful whatsoever. I think it's a waste of time, right? And we may never know for sure every meaning of every obsession or why you had every obsession that you have. Frankly, I tell people it really doesn't matter. What matters most is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to live your life, or are you going to live the life that OCD wants you to live? And that's where I think it's really, really important. Okay. Chelsea says, how long does it take to get a hoarding specialist for your mom? It's been a couple of weeks for NOCD to partner up with her. Chelsea, reach out to me and let me just see what state you're in and what I can do to make sure that we get something for you there. We do have some hoarding people all over the place, so I'm going to make sure that we help get that set up. Let's see. We're almost to the end. Can OCD make us more prone to overanalyzing? Yep, sure. You seek reassurance, and the response you get to analyze the body language, facial expressions, tone of voice. Then if it doesn't feel right, it confirms my fear. I think everybody would say, you got that right. Yep, that's the way that it goes. That's absolutely how it works. And, boy, that's where OCD will go, right? It's always going to read into things, and never good reading into anything. It only is a very negative reading into something. I've not seen it work really, really well. I've not seen it make anybody's life better by any means whatsoever. And so I would say this, that nowhere when you're reading into things with OCD are you going to get to a point where you're going to be like, wow, that felt really great. So glad that I read into that. It just doesn't work whatsoever. Not, at least not that way. All right, everyone. Well, it's been a fun night, as always. Always looking forward to doing these. And, here's a couple of just final things for everybody to think about. Number one, I'm sorry I'll never see any of you ever again, because I'm likely going to be hit by lightning in the next 23 hours now. So it's been a joy speaking to all of you for the last 4.5 years. I think it was 4.5 years now that we started doing this. If by chance I don't get back next week, we'll try to find a new host. No one will be hopefully as funny as I am, but we'll try to find one. And if I do come back, it's not going to be because I did a compulsion, because I am not going to do any compulsions whatsoever. I'm going to live with the doubt and the uncertainty that I have about lightning striking me, because it is possible that it will. And I'm going to live with that possibility and not see it as a high probability. And if you could all work on that, I think you start to feel better. If you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, check us out at NOCD.com. That's NOCD.com. We do work with obsessive compulsive disorder and hoarding and body-focused repetitive behaviors and tics. We also help people who have the associated anxiety issues and mood issues that come along with those as well. And if you have some questions about OCD and you want a more in-depth time with me or my team, well, you could do a NOCD 411 session where for an hour you'll get to be with us and we can answer all sorts of questions for you about OCD, and also potentially how to maybe help a friend or relative who has OCD if they're not ready quite yet for therapy. On that note, I thank you all for joining. As always, it has been a blast to spend some time with all of you. And my best to everyone. I hope that you will get out there and do all of the things that you need to do to not let OCD run your life. I hope that you will decide that it is you that wants to rule the world and not your OCD. Because as I contend all the time, I do not believe that OCD has your best interests at heart. And I want you to do the things that you need to do for yourself. Go out there, do it, be good to yourself. Talk to you later.